Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Riaz. We're very honored to be having you here today. I would like to welcome you all for this 3-hour gathering on the art of listening. My name is Sharaya, and I am going to be your Open Circle host for today. And if you have any technical questions, please feel free to message me via the chat. So during this event, we will be using the raise hand function. So if you have a question for Riaz, please go ahead and click on the reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you can see the raise hand function there. Great. And without further ado, I'll be handing over to you, Riaz. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharaya. Well, it's lovely to be here with you all. It's lovely to see your faces. Those of you that I can see so far, I'm hoping that the few of you that are off screen will be presenting your beautiful faces soon. I see a couple of familiar faces, Mike and Janice. And then good to meet you too as well, Alex. And I see Lori, Josie, and Deborah. Hopefully they'll be coming on screen. That's my preference today, by the way. Maybe other people might be joining. I know more people have signed up, but some people might be watching the recording, but maybe people are going to meander in a few minutes late. That happens sometimes. There we go, right on target. Richard's showing up. Good. So yeah, show your faces if you can. The preference is that we can see each other, really be with each other, and it really helps create that sense of connection, contact, and deepens the collective field, which is a big part of our learning and exploring together. It's a collective effort. I never really see myself as just sort of the expert that's disseminating information. I will have information I'm sharing, but the biggest thing that I'm hoping to do is to invite us all into a listening field, a field of presence, connection, and a being together in the deepest sense. And sometimes, well, not sometimes, actually, how we show up is really crucial, each one of us. So if you can show up with your face showing, that's even better. We love to see each other too. Oh yeah, welcome those of you jumping in. We're just getting started. Hello, Richard. Hello, Rajan. Lots of familiar faces today. Lovely. Nice to see you again. I'm going to go slow here, and I have a feeling a couple more people are still coming in. So just, we've already started. Don't wait for us to start. This is settling in, deepening into your own presence, but actually taking each other in right now, just in the silence, just seeing each other and being seen. Okay, well, welcome. I'll just start speaking and people will join in as they can. So really, it's an honor to be here today. I get to speak about, but also participate in something that's really dear to my heart, my spirit. Listening, deeply listening. And we get to listen to each other. We get to be together. We get to learn from each other. And we get to listen to ourselves. This is sort of the gift of listening. I'll speak more about this, but when we really listen to each other, when we're really giving each other our full presence, we don't just give the gift of our listening, we help each other listen more deeply to ourselves. So to me, that's always the profound aspect of this. I know that when I feel this, when somebody's really listening and I can really feel their presence, feel their undivided attention, it feels amazing because I feel less alone. But it also feels amazing because I feel like I am listening to myself more vividly, more intimately. So the listening we offer is not just our listening, it's actually an attunement to listening in general. And we're helping the other person listen to themselves, even as they're being listened to. So yeah, welcome everybody. It's the last couple of people jumped in, so that's great. We may have more coming along as we flow down this stream together of learning. So glad to see some familiar faces again, and nice to see some new faces too. So I just mentioned earlier, for those of you that didn't come in, my preference and my ask is if you can stay on screen as best as you can, show your face, let each other see you. If you have to step away, you need to step away, but that's my preference. It really helps the group field and helps us stay connected. And that'll just help whatever happens through today. We will take a break in the middle somewhere, probably 10 to 15 minutes. So just want you to know that. I'll be listening to when that might be a good opportunity and tuning into when you all might need a stretch or whatever you need in that little break. If at some point you're feeling restless and tired, and feel free to even just raise your hand and say, "Are we going to take a break soon?" It will, I may not be listening really well. I might be quite excited about what's happening and tune out. So, and I'll say that as well. Uh, our lovely host today, Shariah, will be helping me as we go along. If you have a question, if something comes up, something technical comes up, you can go directly to Shariah in the chat. But if there's just a question you have or a comment that comes up, just use the raised hand function, which is at the bottom of your screen. Most of you, might be familiar with it already. It's in the reactions tab, I believe, at the bottom. So just click on the raised hand and I'll see your hand up. And if I don't stop immediately in that moment, I'll wait for a nice pause or a nice break and I'll come back to you. So you don't have to just literally hold your hand up the whole time. Just click on the raised hand function and it lets me know there's a question waiting at an opportune moment and I'll come back to you. And I love questions, by the way. I love comments. I love people's reports. They help me teach and they help each other learn because your question is not only for you. Most of the time, our questions, as silly as we might think they might be, are actually other people's questions. So you're usually doing me and the group a service by just being bold or curious or transparent with your process. So feel free. I really enjoy that. Okay. More just framework. There will be a break, and we will, in the second half, be doing a dyad practice. Most of you have maybe done this before, but Shariah will kindly break us into pairs where you'll enter into a Zoom room with one other person, and I'll describe what you'll be doing, but we'll be practicing some of the techniques or the attentional practices that I will be talking about. And I may also demonstrate that with one of you at some point if it feels helpful. Okay. Yeah, I think that's most of the kind of housekeeping structure framework. Well, let me do this. Let me ring my bell and just help us all as we listen to the bell reverberate. Just drop into listening. That's how I think about meditation. It's just listening. It's just open listening to the body, to the breath, to sound, to just listening itself. So yeah, just ring the bell. We'll have a couple of minutes in silence and then we'll move into words from there. Okay. As soon as I rang the bell and I just dropped in, one of the immediate experiences was just a lot of energy, a lot of excitement. And really, I think it's about excitement of this topic, of sharing on this topic. As I maybe mentioned earlier, it's one of my favorite topics. It's one of my favorite things to do, is to deeply listen, to deeply commune with another. It's one of the ways that I feel I can give a gift to others. And interestingly enough, it's also one of the ways that I experience the deepest gift being given to me often. So it's no wonder that I love to practice and teach something that I love to receive. And I just want to dedicate our day today, our time together, our learning together, is not just for ourselves. Hopefully you will benefit from what we're learning today. But it's not just for you, and listening's such an obvious one, isn't it? The better you are at listening, the more generous and open-hearted and present you are, the better person you are, the better you're able to love and support life and others around you. So this is to me, a beautiful practice. It's not just for ourselves, it's actually for everybody else. And as it always seems to be, things are never for any one person. When we are giving deeply to another and spreading joy, we are giving deeply to ourselves and receiving joy. So that's how I think about listening, is it's a deep practice. And as I mentioned in the write-up, that you may remember or not, I think of listening as a practice, it's a relational practice. It's something we do with others. It's also something we do on our own. Like I mentioned earlier, I think of meditation as listening in its most essential form. You might think of it as listening to ourselves, but just listening to life. And like any practice, our intention and our attention is necessary, is part of what improves us, deepens us, grows us, evolves the practice. So there is no perfection, there's just actually practice. And ideally, deeper and deeper layers and levels of mastery or ability that grow. And what a beautiful practice, because we're never going to stop having opportunities to practice. We live in a relational world where we're constantly being asked to listen, needing to listen. So you get to practice this all the time. And I really think about it as a spiritual practice. I think about it as actually a really deep way to deepen into presence, but also deepen into authentic relating, into connection. So we touch into both these dimensions. You can see as my hand moves up and down, there's this vertical dimension, the dimension of presence or of transcendence, of connecting to something that's so deeply you, it's beyond you. And at the same time, you're also connecting to something on this, as you see my hand go horizontally. You're connecting to the other, to the human dimension, the relational dimension. And when we go deeply into that practice, we actually also transcend in a sense. We realize that there is no other. So listening deeply is a spiritual practice in that it goes beyond the personality. It connects us with our essence on a vertical dimension, our transcendent nature, and it connects us with the depths of what it means to be a person, a human, and even transcends the apparent separation or boundaries that we tend to ordinarily perceive as between us. So there's a deep opportunity here to live a practice, a profound practice of embodying and relating from our deepest nature and connecting from our deepest nature. I'll read a quote, which, some of you may know this quote. It's one of my favorite quotes about listening. It's from Eckhart Tolle. And he says, when listening to another person, don't just listen with your mind, listen with your whole body. Feel the energy field of your inner body as you listen. That takes attention away from thinking and creates a still space that enables you to truly listen without the mind interfering. You are giving the other person space. Space to be. It is the most precious gift you can give. It's a beautiful quote. In our deep listening, in our deep presence, we're dropping into something that's deeper than our mind. We're not just listening with our mind, which is the ordinary habitual way. We think we need to pay attention to listen, and we often pay attention with our minds. But Eckhart is actually inviting us to listen with our whole body. And he's actually even pointing to something that's even deeper than how we might think of our physical body. He's saying to listen with the energy field of your inner body. So we're listening on a more subtle level than just even our physical body and our ordinary mind. I like to think of it as listening with our whole being. As I was this morning thinking about this talk, I had this sort of fresh image pop up to me. I want to talk about what does it mean to listen with our whole body. As I was walking, I was actually had this sort of image of my two hands together. And, like I said, this is a spiritual practice. And really, I think about it as a non-dual practice. And, for those of you that are not familiar with what that means, really non-dual is referring to, from this perspective, from this view, we are not separate. There's an underlying unity or oneness in which each one of us is an expression, an inseparable, undivided expression of the oneness of life, of consciousness, of awareness, of energy, lots of different ways you can think about it or talk about it. But in that sense, if we are truly just an expression of the whole, each of us is an expression of that whole. Like both your hands are an expression or an extension of your whole body. And so you can think about your left hand and your right hand, and you can touch them together, and they can make contact. And that's a real experience. But if you don't think about it, and you just feel into it and sense into it, even though they're separate, they're not separate. They are the same being, the same body. And yet, when they touch, something new happens. Something, actually, if you do it right now, just touch your hands together. Just allow yourself to just feel the contact. You can do it lightly or whatever way feels good. Notice that something new comes into being. You might be aware of each hand separately, but as they come together, there's a warmth or an aliveness or contact or pressure. Something new comes into being that neither one could actually fully experience without the other. So something comes into aliveness, into a potentiality, comes into being in connection. Just like when two people come into connection, something wholly new comes together that actually can't happen just on your own. And then if you take one of your hands, just allow it to caress and touch and feel the other. Just do it very self-consciously. Just allow your hands to be with each other. You might even think of it as one hand being with the other more primarily. So you're caressing, touching, attuning to one. Just notice that you might notice this, there's like a tenderness that's available. There's a loving quality that comes into being that's possible here. We do this sometimes when our hand is tired or sore. You might massage it, right? You might stretch it. You might just manipulate it in a gentle way. And so that one sore hand by itself, it can stretch. It can kind of, try to make itself feel better. But oh my God, what an amazing thing when the other hand comes in and kind of can feel into like, oh, where are you sore? Oh, where are you tight? What can I offer you? Obviously, our hands are not asking this, but in a silent way, that's what we're doing when one hand is rubbing or caressing or kneading or massaging or warming the other. So that's just an experiential way to think about what we're doing with another person. And well, I'll just say this. When this hand likes it, when this other hand does this hand own the pleasure? Does it only feel the benefit of it? Where is that located? Where's the net positive effect? It's like the whole being experiences that, right? You can't just say it belongs to the one hand. It might be more localized here, like, oh, there's relief here physically. But the being lights up, like you feel, oh, that felt good, that feels good. So glad to give that to myself. So glad to receive that from myself, right? Words kind of break down when we're talking about the body. Distinctions of self and other break down. Well, the same thing applies with each other. When we're deeply listening, deeply being listened to, which direction is the love flowing? Which way is the benefit going? My sense is that the overall benefit, the overall sense of joy or compassion or love or harmony is increasing. And we can feel the gift even as we're listening, and we might think of ourselves as the giver, but I think that distinction breaks down, and it's a great way to think about this practice. We're not giving our attention to the other, giving pleasure to the other, being selfless in the ordinary way we might think of it. We're actually giving to ourselves. We're actually attuning from the depth of our being to the apparent other, and it feels good to be in that flow. So that's what I want to talk about today and describe and demonstrate, and for each of us to practice. How to give ourselves fully as we listen as a practice of loving, as a practice of awareness, as a practice of compassion. So that's my introduction to how I think about listening and deep listening and what I intend to be practicing together and learning together. I'll read another quote that I love about this. I like it because it's not very technical. And I'm going to give us some technical descriptions, not highly technical, but instructions about different layers of listening and how to listen without agenda and how to listen with the body and all of that. And that's important to take in. But mostly what I like about this quote is it's actually very simple. It's very intuitive. It's very human. So we don't need to get too involved with our minds with trying to be perfect in our practice. So this is a Maya Angelou quote. And she says, I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Isn't that true? And in a way, this could apply to a lot of different things, but I'm applying it to listening. It's the quality of our listening that's most important. The feeling, the energy of listening. That's really at the heart of this. That's what people will remember, is how you made them feel. And not because you were trying to make them feel any particular way, just because the feeling is what comes through when we're deeply listening, when we're listening from our hearts and from our whole beings. We may have said something that we think is brilliant or not. They may remember it or not. But it's really the feeling. I have this experience as a therapist. Many of you know, I've been a therapist for a long time. And, in the course of a session or over the course of many sessions with people over the years, sometimes I think, my little mind goes, oh, that was really brilliant, or that was super helpful or insightful or something, and I kind of pat myself on the back. But often, spontaneously what happens is people at times in a session or maybe later sessions will say, God, that thing you did or that thing you said was so impactful. It's never what I think it is. It's never what I would kind of put on my highlight reel of my most brilliant moments or helpful moments. It's usually the quiet things. It's usually the simple things that I haven't even thought about it. And yes, I did see your quote, your request there, Marilena. I hope I'm saying your name right. I'll post both those quotes later, so you'll have them today in the chat. Yeah. So I think that's my way of saying, don't try to be brilliant. Don't try to be smart. Don't try to be helpful. Don't try to be whatever. Don't try. Just be. The being is enough. The being is more than enough. We tend to think that we need to be more than we are. We need to give more than we could just naturally give. Words will come, reflections will happen, insights will come, connections will come. But you don't need to try to make those happen. People just really need us to listen to them, to just be with them. It just helps them feel less alone. Yes, that's the most basic level of it. But it helps them feel listened to, which helps them listen to themselves, which helps them align with themselves, come into alignment with themselves, which is really all we need. It's all we want. In a way, you can think about suffering as being more or less in alignment with yourself, or happiness or peace being that, And so coming more into alignment with yourself, helping another come more into alignment or attunement is another way to say it, is a beautiful gift, because that is what we all are most deeply needing. To feel ourselves, to feel at peace with ourselves, to feel like we can just authentically be who we are and where we are. So we don't, also the other place we get hung up on, and I can do this too, is we feel like we need to take away people's distress, people's suffering. That kind of listening is another kind of trying and doing that subtly communicates where you are and who you are isn't okay. Let's get you to okayness because it exists somewhere else. Here's a great idea or way that we can find okayness, because it's not here. It's not where you are. It's not what you are. So don't get too hung up in that, but just know that by listening deeply, by staying at home in yourself, in a very deep way, in an unspoken way, you're letting people know that they're okay. And what's happening right now is okay. And they can trust it. It doesn't mean that it's not going to change, or it doesn't need to change, or you don't even want it to change. In a way, you're trusting that being with it, listening to it, you listening to them listening to it, is going to reveal the way, the next step or movement towards deeper alignment, more wholeness. Okay, so that's my introduction to what listening is for me. And I'll go into a kind of a description and then a kind of invitation to the 4 levels of listening. But before I go into that description and invitation, is there any questions or comments so far? Just want to take a pause and listen, see if there's anything alive for anybody here. Yes, Richard, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, so I was just looking to hear your perspective. If you're there with the person and you're not trying to fix or improve or change or even help them, so to say, what motivates you or what to show up in apparent support of people?
I love your question, Richard. Yeah. I will answer your question, but I actually love your question because I want to ask you that question. It's a great question to ask ourselves. So if it's not trying to help, trying to fix, trying to improve, what motivates you when you sit with another to give them your presence, to listen to them?
Well, I know for me, there's just like on the other side of that, to be with like a therapist I've had for a long time who I didn't know there was such like listening or presencing available. And it's touched me so deeply to be able to like lean into that, or, just as an offering, just because I'm so grateful to see how much that's touched me.
It's beautiful. I can feel how touched you are by that. And what I hear you saying is that what and how you've been touched is what you want to offer. It just wants to flow forward. You want to pay it forward, so to speak. Is that accurate?
Yeah, without even, yeah. And it's not, yeah, it's just like the pay it forward is actually coming from here. It's not even really coming from here. It's like, yeah, it's just.
I mean, yeah, for those of you who can see, Richard's actually saying it's not coming from the head with his hands. He's saying it's coming from his heart. There's just a flowing forth, which is really my answer to your question. It is love for me, or compassion, but it's the heart's desire to love, to be with. So that's my answer, in a way, is that it's one of the ways I get to love. It's one of the most beautiful ways I get to love. It's just like this hand wants to, touch, be with, caress, massage this other hand, particularly if this hand is in distress. But when it's not in distress, it's just like, maybe I just want to play. Maybe I just want to, somebody wrote commune. I love that, communion, right? It's another way to talk about this. We all have different answers to that question. And I think it's great to feel into your question. Beautiful. Richard, what is it that moves you, motivates you to listen? So Daniela says, for me, it's about communion. Daniela, not to put you on the spot, but can you say what communion is for you?
just being held in the space together. I'm also a therapist, so I'm thinking also my work with clients. It's just the pleasure, I guess it comes back to what, the heart, yeah. of being in communion, two hearts in communion. It's yeah, there's just something very restful and beautiful about just resting together like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Beautiful. It's right there in the words, right? Communion. I don't know the dictionary definition in there, but I see co in there, which infers more than one, two, like a pair maybe, or more than one, and union, right? And so it's like coming into union is how I think about it. It's one of the ways that we really heal the sense of separation. We feel the union. We feel it as we listen, and we feel it as we're listened to. Yeah. Somebody else said something, what's that? Josie, listening is an act of love. I love that. That really resonates deeply for me. Oh, yeah. Oh, she's got the shirt on. Yes. Okay. That's awesome. Beautiful. And by the way, and I think this is clear, I'm talking about it in the context of being a therapist, but not all of us are healers or therapists. And I really wanted to talk about this in every context, whether you're talking and listening with a friend or your child or a parent or a partner or a grocery clerk or whomever. Dog. Some of our pets we have the most deepest communion with, don't we? I do. We get out of our minds with animals, actually. Isn't that interesting? Because you can't communicate in the usual way. So there's like a kind of, for me, I just noticed like everything else just opens up. It's like language actually, interestingly enough, it's such an incredible gift we have to understand each other and to express and to be understood. But it also is a place we get tripped up if we get too focused on the words, we get too mind oriented. So being with animals, for example, or being with nature is just another way of listening with our whole being, with our whole body. We can't do it very well when we listen with our minds, with animals or with nature. And so that segues us into what I want to talk about, or what I want to describe. How do we listen deeper than our minds? How do we listen beyond the words, including the words? Words are really important for humans, for human connection. So I don't want to discount that. But let's not stop there. Let's go beyond the words. So I'll talk about some other aspects of this later, about how to listen without agenda, how to listen from not knowing, things I've written in my notes, but I'll come back to those. So what I want to explore is listening deeply. And I think about it as the 4 levels of listening. I'll describe them briefly, and then I'm going to invite us into listening almost as a meditation. It's a way of listening to yourself on these 4 levels, or listening on these 4 levels, from these 4 levels. Okay. So what I'll say is that, in my practice as a therapist, is one of the most important things is to set an intention with any practice. Setting an intention is the most important thing. It sets what's about to happen apart from our normal, ordinary kind of mind stream of distraction or fixation or whatever it is, doing. So when you sit to meditate, as my teacher, Adyashanti, likes to say, you make a commitment, He talks about 3 commitments. I won't go into all that, but basically, you make a commitment in a way in meditation is to be still. So for me, when I sit with clients, I kind of make a commitment to listen deeply. And in a way, what I'm doing is I'm ringing the bell internally to just put aside my thoughts, whatever's been happening previously, even actually to put aside what happened last session or what I think needs to happen this session, to just put everything aside and to just be in the moment and to listen and to be present in the now. So there's an intention that I ring the bell, which helps my mind then bring attention to. So attention will follow intention. So just simply when you're listening, could be to your spouse, could be to your friend, could be to whoever, when they start talking or you know you're about to start listening, just ring the bell internally. Can I just deeply listen? Can I set aside my own thoughts, my own agenda, and just open to what arises in this moment? And that'll help your attention come back to that. You may not even notice that you've already started listening, but as soon as you're noticing like, oh, wow, we're really in a talk now, or I'm listening, then you ring the bell. It doesn't need to be before you start. You can ring the bell as you go, which is, oh, I'm listening. Okay, put your mind aside, put your thoughts aside. They're less important than what he or she is saying. So ring that bell at the beginning and then over and over again. Begin again. You notice yourself distracted. You notice yourself getting ahead of, oh, I've got a brilliant thing I want to say to them, or like, oh, it reminds me of this thing. When I stop, I'm going to tell them about my experience. Or, oh yeah, I have an idea about what they're supposed to do or where they're supposed to go or how those two things or three things are connected. Our minds are just incredible pattern makers, strategizers, problem solvers. It's not a problem, but what I'm saying is this intentional practice is, don't prioritize that. Don't let that take front and center of your experience. Set it aside. And just keep coming back to listening, and I'll talk about what that means. So those are my main intentions, is to just listen deeply, to set aside my agenda, my previous experience, my future tripping, and just be in the moment. And then to keep ringing that bell if I notice myself distracted, caught in thoughts. And then the other intention, and this is what I'm going to describe in the 4 levels of deep listening, is to listen deeply. And when I say listen deeply, I mean listen on the level of the mind, on the level of the heart, on the level of the body, and my hand goes down to the belly, but it means the whole body. But the belly is a good kind of focal point for that. And then on the level of awareness or presence, we'll talk about what that is. The mind has trouble with understanding what that level is, but it's just listening. I could just stop there. It's just being aware of being aware. So I'll walk us into that level as I go through the 4 levels. You could just call it the level of essential listening or essence or presence. Okay. So that's the bell that I ring is, the intention I have is to keep reminding myself, don't just listen with your mind, listen with the heart, listen with the body, and listen from essence. So I'll walk us into that. And the one more thing I'll say before I do that is the breath, just like in meditation, is an anchor. For me, it's a really beautiful anchor because it's natural, it's effortless, it's always happening. So you don't need to make it happen. It's always available to attune to. And when you attune to your breath, you come into the now, because your breath's only happening now. It's not happening a moment ago or the next moment. It's happening in this moment. And you also attune to sensation, the body. When you're listening to your breath or attuning to your breath, you can't help but be attuning to the sensation of breath. And so it brings you into the body. So it brings you into the now, it brings you into the body. So it's a beautiful anchor. It's a beautiful touchstone to keep coming back to. It helps you get out of the mind. It helps you get out of problem solving or fixing, or moving ahead of where you are. So I will say that. Okay, so let's go into deep listening. I invite you to listen to this not with your mind, not as information. Don't worry about writing this down. I could even actually, on the break, post this or actually even better, I've got a write-up of this, and I can send it to everybody by email. I'll get all your emails sent to me, and I'm happy to send this deep listening exercise to you, so you'll have notes about this. Feel free to take notes, but not while I'm guiding you into the meditation. It's an experiential invitation, okay? All right. So get comfortable. You can have your eyes closed if you'd like. Just let yourself take a few gentle breaths consciously. Just notice your breathing. Notice the breath. And you'll use the breath to come back to any moments you feel distracted or just want to come back into presence or sensation or the now. So we're going to start by listening on the level of the mind. This is the ordinary way we listen. You're hearing my words. They're making sense to you. So just let that be received. My communication through words. You're understanding me. The mind just does that automatically. You don't have to try to understand. You don't have to be extra mindful and think about what I'm saying. So you don't need to capture my words or even record my words with the mind. The mind can do that. It can be pretty good at remembering and recording and capturing. But this invitation is just simply let the words come, let them be understood, and then let them pass through. Nothing to hold on to. You might even notice you can just relax your face, relax your eyes, relax your forehead. We tend to grasp with our eyes, with our foreheads, with the front of our minds when we think. This is a more relaxed, non-thinking, receptive mind. So just feel the openness of this mind, of your mind right now. It doesn't need to chew on things. It can just hear and listen to the words when they come and let them go when they're not here. Now just let your breath drop down to your heart space. Maybe sense the breath. Breathe into the heart. And just feel into the space of your heart. Letting yourself feel whatever's here. You're feeling whatever emotion or feeling tone is here. It might be quite subtle or soft, barely noticeable. It might be more acute. It might be positive, warmth, love, compassion, tenderness. It might be what we would refer to as more negative, sad, constricted, tight. Closed. It might be a mix of the two. Whatever it is, just open to it as it is. Whatever the feeling tone is, it might be fairly neutral. Let the feeling be what it is. Breathe into it, allow it. And notice that you're still listening to me, even as you're listening to yourself. Both can be happening. You might even notice as you're listening on this level of the heart, on the level of feeling, of emotion, you might be noticing my emotion, my feeling tone. You might be having a sense of where I am at. It may be just a vibratory, empathic sense of my emotional experience, feeling tone, neutral, positive, negative, mixed. And you don't need to think about it. You don't even need to put words to it unless they just come naturally. Just notice that you may be vibrating, resonating, feeling with me. So this is listening on the level of emotion, of the heart, of feeling. It's what we might refer to as empathy. It's a resonance on a feeling level. It's a vibrating with, a feeling with. And now let your breath drop down into the belly. Sense your belly. Sense the space of the belly, the vibration, the feeling and sensation of your lower belly, your breath filling your belly. Whatever's here, welcome it, open to it. And then notice just the whole body, the vibration of the whole body. Your arms, your legs, your hands, your feet, your belly, your chest, your face, your neck, your throat. Just tune into the whole sense of the body, the energy field of the body, the inner body, as Eckhart was saying. You're just tuning into this subtle experience of energy and vibration, aliveness. Certain areas may feel more alive or more numb, or more quiet. Certain areas may feel more tense, intense, warm. Certain areas may feel less available or accessible. Just notice it as it is, no preference, just what's here. We're just listening to the body, and we're listening with the body. It's like the body is resonating with everything around it, including my voice, including my body, maybe even the bodies of others in this field. Our energies are intermingling, are vibrating, resonating. This is a different kind of empathy. It's what you might call energetic resonance, somatic resonance. Like when two tuning forks are close to each other, one will be struck and vibrate, and then the other will just harmonically resonate with the first one. Our bodies are sensitive instruments in that same way when we listen to them and with them. Now just allow yourself to feel the breath in the body, in the belly, and just feel the space around the body, within the body. Just attune to the sense of quiet, open spaciousness that's all around you. that's even within you. There's just this quiet background, this open awareness. We're just opening to this openness that's always here. That's what we are. It's this open, aware presence. We can be aware of all of the objects in awareness. Thoughts, words, feelings, sensations. And we can also attune to and open to just this actual experience of openness, this ground of openness, of simply being. All of these levels of listening exist simultaneously. We can listen with an open mind, with an open heart, with an open body, and just open awareness. And on this deepest level, it doesn't belong to any one of us. We belong to it, probably is a better way to say it. In this open field, we just are vibrating, listening, connecting with each other, as each other. As you open your eyes and take each other in, allow yourself to stay listening, stay at home in these 4 levels of listening. You're hearing my words, you're seeing each other, but you're sensing and feeling and opening from all these layers, all these levels, with each other, to each other. It's the same listening. It's the same thing listening. Over here, over there. Your particular vantage point, your particular energy field, history, mind, body, heart, distinct, unique. And yet that's kind of the miracle. Like we can listen to each other, we can understand each other, we can feel each other, we can commune. Because we're not separate, we're just coming together. One body touching itself in this particular moment, in this particular way. And there's a delight in it, isn't there? We get to play, we get to dance, we get to love, we get to share, create. none of that's possible without each other. I guess it is, but would it be as meaningful? Be as lovely? So it's a shared field that we're sitting together in. Okay, so I guess I'll just say, maybe we'll take a break soon. I'll open it up if people have anything they want to share. What we're going to be doing in the second half of our time is learning to listen on these 4 levels, but staying at home in our own experience with the other. It sounds, maybe it does to you, it sounds to me, and it always is to me, like a pretty profound practice. Like not a very easy practice, actually. You know, it's hard enough to sit on the cushion by yourself and meditate and stay at home, to stay listening without your mind or your body or your emotions pulling you off center, away from this present moment, away from presence, into something that feels less present. And so when we're sitting with others, the pull is there, right? The words, the feelings of the other, the roles we get into, the habitual conditioning that we are all conditioned into in different ways in this human relating field. But it's a beautiful practice and an ongoing practice. Can I actually stay at home and ring that bell and listen on all these levels with the other, with myself? And then we notice what happens in that intentional way of listening. We notice new possibilities arise. I can't say what they are for you, what you'll discover moment to moment. But what I can say for myself in this practice is I feel a lot of things that don't come online when I'm just ordinary listening in my mind. And I do that too, by the way. This is a practice. I love that I'm a therapist because I very intentionally, multiple times a week, multiple times a day, invite myself into deep listening. And I receive the benefit of that. I feel more present, more alive, more connected. I get to love, I get to receive, I get to do this thing that feels so good, very intentionally. And then, if my wife was online right now, she'll tell you, oh, he's not always listening that way. He's distracted, he's caught up, he thinks he's heard it all. He's anticipating what I'm going to say. So it's a practice. It's always available. I fall off it all the time. I remind myself to get back, to ring the bell over and over and over again. So I just invite us all to be gentle with ourselves, to be human and humble, but to keep inviting yourself back into every moment as an opportunity to practice. Every person in front of you is a way to meet yourself more deeply, a way to love, to commune, to give what you have to give, and to receive what you have to receive. Okay, that's my first half of the day, my preamble, my introduction, my invitation. The second half will be more practice, more, anything before we take a break that feels alive or interesting or you want to share or ask? Okay, maybe what I'm hearing is let's take a break. Okay, 10:36 on my clock, so let's come back in 14 minutes at 50 minutes past. Please be ready to go and I'll start up again. And please stay on. You can just mute yourself and turn your screen off. Better than signing off and trying to sign back in. And I'll post in the quotes on chat. Okay. Welcome back, and let's just give it a minute or so for the last couple of people to pop back on screen. As you may notice, I hope you can see it, I did post both of those quotes, the Eckhart Tolle quote and the Maya Angelou quote. Great. Okay, well, let's resume. I'll open it up in a moment and see if there's any questions about what we've done so far, but I'm going to say that this next section is more experiential. We're practicing, and mostly you're practicing, being in pairs with each other. But, you know, it might sound like a lot what I just did, like, oh, listening on 4 levels and not having an agenda and all of that while you're listening to the other person. And it can be a lot. But I want to really make it simple for you, because it's a practice. And it's kind of like if you were learning a musical instrument. At the beginning, you're learning all these scales, and then somebody's asking you to play music, and you're like, oh my God, how do I make the music while I'm focusing on my fingers and where all the notes are and all of that. So there's a few things I want to say. One is that we all know how to listen. This isn't some new thing. It's really natural. We all know how to be present. It's really natural. This is just really a way to invite ourselves and re-invite ourselves to not be caught in our minds in the habitual ways that we're listening. And so a shortcut to these 4 levels of listening that I've developed, I will send this out, by the way, I've got a write-up on this, so I'm happy to send it out to everybody, is just let yourself listen naturally. Don't get into like, oh my God, I've got to listen on 4 levels and ring the bell and focus on this. You're going to get too overwhelmed if you're trying to do it perfectly. So like I said, use the breath as an anchor. So something I just ask myself from time to time as I'm listening is I just say, am I breathing? Or am I aware of breathing? Which just automatically brings me back into awareness of breathing. As soon as I'm aware of breathing, I automatically drop out of my mind to some degree and come into my body and come into the present moment. So the breath is just a great practice, like in meditation. I just check and see, am I breathing? Which brings me into awareness of breath. And in the same way, on these 4 levels, I don't say, am I thinking? Because I'm always thinking. I don't need to remind myself about that, but I do say, am I feeling? Just internally, very quietly. And it just gets easier and easier to do that. It's just a way to bring you into the heart, to bring you into the feeling level. Or what am I feeling is another way to do it. So am I breathing? Am I feeling? Or what am I feeling? It just tunes me into that level of the heart or of the emotional experience. And then same thing, it might be, am I sensing? What am I sensing? It just brings me back into sensation. You can do all of those without distracting from the words the other person's saying. Pretty simple. You can just become aware of breathing become aware of feeling, become aware of sensing. And it just brings the center of gravity back down into these levels, because our center of gravity tends to go up here, tends to be where we track and prepare and strategize and think we need to be listening and paying attention from. So it just counterbalances it. And then the last thing that I do sometimes is I just say, am I aware? And for me, it just has this sort of bell-like quality of it just opens up some space. It opens up the field. So my listening isn't so on the objects, words, the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations. It is those things, but it's actually aware of the space around and in all of that. So what I notice is it just opens up a kind of a spacious quality in my listening. So that's a shorthand way of practicing. As you listen just naturally, normally to another person, just drop those questions in, almost like a ringing of the bell. Am I breathing? Am I feeling? Am I sensing? Am I aware? So hopefully that simplifies it a little bit and helps you as you go into your dyad practice. Just practice, and I'll have more to say about the dyad practice, but I want to talk about it as a practice, as just a way to get better at something or just try something new out. Just want to pause and just see if there's any questions or comments so far. Yeah, Janice, I see your hand up.
I wasn't sure how to put the other hand up. You have a question. It's wonderful, clear, but you haven't addressed that when there's this openness. I'm feeling joy and connection, but there's this vulnerability that's here as well. So, can you speak to that?
Well, let me ask you a little bit more so I know what you want me to speak to. So when you say, when you connect to this openness, there's this vulnerability.
Sure.
Can you say more about that, or what your question is about that? Like what gets confusing, or
First.
Yeah, please.
So it's been great. I love when you put us through the different levels of connection or listening. And I felt such an invitation to go so deep with that. But there's a little fear of that complete vulnerability that I sense in this deep listening. So the joy and then the fear, to be actually, is probably just as good of a word.
Mm-hmm.
Can you help me with another? How you want? That's generally what I'm asking about, how to meet that, I guess.
Yeah.
Fall into it, I suppose, right?
Well, it's a great question, because I think what you're speaking to is something in general, which is that this is a more vulnerable, more tender way of listening. It opens us up to the other person's experience more fully, more immediately. We're not just conceptualizing around it or thinking about their experience. We're opening to their experience. We're letting ourselves feel how we're touched, feel a lot. And we're also opening our hearts and opening our bodies in a way that, is vulnerable. We're not as defended. We're not as protected, So what I would say about it is just be at your own level, be at your own edge. Don't force yourself to be more open than you can tolerate. But be at your edge, because I think we tend to stay in our comfort zone when we listen, which is like, oh, I'm going to listen with my mind. I'm going to be somewhat kind of protected. And I am inviting us into a practice that is relational and is vulnerable, is alive, is tender. And so you get to practice in different contexts with different people at different times at your own pace, So you might notice, Janice, and any of you, you'll feel more you'll feel more of your own experience. You'll feel more resonant experience. You'll feel more empathic experience. I would just allow yourself to just naturally self-regulate. And what I mean by that is you don't need to turn it down. Just your body and your mind will kind of find its own level, its own edge. But I do actually encourage you to feel more vulnerable, feel more tender, feel more open. And you might surprise yourself. You might notice that it's actually okay to be a little more vulnerable, a little more tender, a little more feeling of your own experience or their experience. This is practice. So I don't know if I'm answering your question really well, but you're making a really good point, which is it is a more vulnerable way of being with other people. Some of us really only might let ourselves be this way on our own, in ourselves, in our meditation or in nature, or with only particular loved ones that we feel really safe with. And there's a wisdom to that. And I'm just saying, like any practice, it's like yoga or whatever, find your edge, hang out on your edge. You might notice that your capacity expands over time. Your comfortability with what was uncomfortable becomes increased. So anyway, I hope I answered your question. I did see another question in chat, which seemed quite interesting there. Let me, Daniela says, are you differentiating feelings as being in the body and sensing being impressions we're picking up externally in the energetic body? Wow, what a great question. You know, I don't distinguish them so much. I think that both cross over. So this question gets asked a lot. I do this training with therapists primarily and healers. It's the first time I'm offering it to the general public. And this question often comes up like, what I'm sensing and what I'm feeling, is it mine? Is it theirs? You know, and I don't know. Sometimes it's one or the other. Sometimes it's a mix of both. But what I will say is that whether it's sensations you're feeling or feelings, they can be your own contractions, your own excitement, your own aliveness, your own grief, your own sadness. They can, we get evoked and it stirs our own material up. And it can also be a resonant experience. And what I mean by resonant, I mean it on an emotional level and an energetic or somatic level. You're vibrating with the other person. You're empathically feeling what they're feeling. It's like the mirror neurons are firing, right? And there's so much more science and research showing that actually emotional empathy has actual, cellular vibrational kind of correlates in your body that weren't there until the other person's body was, an experience was kind of vibrating them in you. So I'm really saying that as we listen and stay at home in our bodies, energetically and somatically, and in our hearts, emotionally, we will feel everything of ourselves more acutely, and we will feel more receptively available to what's happening in the other person. Over time, you start to be able to distinguish your own from the others more readily. It becomes less confusing. And you start to trust when you're feeling empathic resonance, empathic emotional stuff. Two things happen, or more than two things, but two things I can think of. You can actually use that to reflect or attune or give your other something. You might just kind of, in your tone, or might be literally, might be like, wow, I really feel you. I really feel the sadness of that, or the tenderness of that, or the grief, or the joy, or whatever it is. And so you're resonating with that is amplifying and helping them tune into and connect with something positive or negative, emotionally or energetically. And so I know I'm kind of straying from your question a little bit, but to come back to in the body, or I think feelings and emotions are happening in the body, in our bodies, but they're vibrating with the other body often. So anyway, I'm not sure I answered your question, but you actually helped me speak about something that I think is really important. And so don't get too caught up when you're listening to the other person. Is this an accurate feeling or an accurate kind of resonance that I'm having. Just feel it and allow it to be there. And then intuitively, when there's a break or you just feel moved to share, wow, I'm really feeling touched by or sad as you talk about this, or you might be like, wow, I imagine this is feeling really joyous to you or sad to you or scary to you. You're using your empathy to ask a question, to reflect an experience, or you may not even be so literal with it. This is the other part. The second, I said there's two things I wanted to say. This is really important. We don't need to say very much often. People feel when they're being felt. We can feel when somebody's with us emotionally, energetically, vibrationally. So this is important. This is one of the biggest parts of listening. Often listening, and it's helpful, is you receive the person and then you let them know you took them in, and so it's reflective listening. And there's an important thing about that. I see this being used methodically, kind of mechanistically often. Therapists have a bad rap for this. Oh, I hear this and I see this, and and it can be useful when it's not done mechanistically. And it can be overdone because people can actually feel us feeling them. They feel the empathic resonance. They feel the togetherness. They feel felt. So trust that. You don't need to be too wordy around your experience. And also trust that when you feel moved to share, let yourself share it. Or when you feel moved to ask a question based on your feeling, because in some ways we're listening to what's not being said, and we're helping people tune into what they're not saying, what's just below awareness. That's one of the gifts of listening to another and being listened to by another. You don't know sometimes until you express it what you're actually thinking and feeling on a deeper level, or especially until somebody asks you a question or reflects back something, or you see it reflected in their gaze or in their tone. You start to actually make connection with your experience more deeply. So you can do that wordlessly, and you can do that with words. Rajan had a question on chat, her aha moment, the mirror to the Maya Angelou quote. Tell us your aha, please, Rajan, if you can explicate a little bit. I'd love to hear what that is.
Yeah, the quietness and vibration is the feeling that you give somebody else. The others, as she says, are less relevant.
Yeah, they may not remember what you said. Maybe what you said or did is not the most important thing. It's beautiful. Thank you for connecting it back to that. What they felt in your presence, in the way you were listening to them, maybe in the way you said something, but they still might not remember what you said. It's more the residue of that.
Being felt. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else before we move into the more experiential? Okay. I have a question for you all. And, we are going to move into dyads. We've got a fair bit of time. We might even get a couple of practices of the dyads, which might be nice. I think most of this is experiential. We can listen to how to listen all day long, but until you practice it, it's like if I was talking about how to play guitar, I'd be like, great, that was 3 hours of information. Now, what do I know? not much more than when I started, So I want the practice to happen. The question I have for you is, would it be helpful to have a demonstration for me just to show this in a very simple way, and then we can talk about it, and then I can send you off into practice? Yeah? Okay, I'm seeing some thumbs up. I'll go with that, some nodding. Okay, this is really simple. When I do this with therapists, I'm doing it in a healing context, and I'll actually ask for a volunteer to come in with material that's more charged or more like therapeutic, and that can be really helpful for the other healers to witness how I work and then to discuss it and to talk about it. This is a little different and a little bit the same. But really what I'm asking here for is a volunteer who wants to work one-on-one with me and be witnessed, to just simply talk, not about something really charged or a problem per se, but to share something meaningful. And it can be meaningful that's just happened recently, that's going on in your life, or that happened recently, that's positive or negative. It could be meaningful in a way like, wow, this is this beautiful, amazing, exciting, thing that's happening, or a scary, difficult, sad, challenging thing. It could be in any direction, but just to give a kind of parameter for it, I don't want it to be your deepest, darkest kind of therapeutic kind of experience that you're wanting some free therapy for. And the only reason I say that is I want it to be kind of similar to our dyads, which is the same instruction I'm going to give to you. Share something meaningful, share something that's alive. Don't talk about something, the weather, or something that's not that meaningful. Because I want you to be having an alive experience, so the person listening to you can kind of vibrate with that and reflect with that, and help you attune to that, make it more meaningful and more alive. So the same thing for my demo. So I just want to invite any one of you that feels moved to come forward. I'll just ask you to speak for a few minutes about anything that feels alive or meaningful. I see a hand right away. So that's great. Josie, you're the first one up. Is that a volunteer hand that you're putting up? Wonderful. So Sharaya, yeah, if you can put her and I together, and I'll ask you actually, Josie, are you okay with me this being recorded with you and I side by side? A few people will be watching this as a recording, not live. Are you comfortable with being spotlighted?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. So Sharaya is going to put us there together. Okay, wonderful.
Does that appear on, does everybody see Riaz and Josie?
You see us together, 2 screens? Great, that's what I'm seeing. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Great, thank you, Sharaya. So this will be short, it won't be more than 10 minutes, it might be 5 to 10 minutes. And I love your t-shirt, it's going to help me just kind of stay at home and attune.
Is it reversed when you see it?
No, it's actually straight on, it's not a mirror image.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah. Are you seeing it reversed on your screen?
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. Great. Well, Josie, thank you so much for volunteering to come forward. And what I will say is the rest of us don't go into spectator mode. I'll say that for 2 reasons. Is actually, as I'm listening and attuning to Josie, allow yourself to practice. Do the same as if you were listening and she was speaking directly to you. Listen on all the 4 levels. Stay in your breath. Listen with your heart and your body and with awareness. So you get to practice. And the second thing that does is not just give you practice, it deepens the field, the holding field. So Josie and I don't feel like we're in a fishbowl just being watched and performing. We're actually just having a communion, a connecting together, and everybody's co-participating in that experience. So we feel listened to and supported in that field. So that's my instruction for everybody else. And then Josie, for you, like I said before, you get to share with me anything that feels alive, meaningful, positive or negative. And I'm just here to take you in. I might offer some reflections or questions, but I might just be silent, just according to how it's flowing. And then we'll probably talk a little bit about it at the end, and I'll give you a little warning, like, okay, in a minute, maybe we'll stop. Like I said, it'll be at least 5 minutes, but probably no more than 10, just to give you a sense of the container. Okay. So take your time whenever you're ready. I'm all ears.
Could you ring the bell, please?
Yeah, happy to.
Hmm.
And you can feel free to start with silence if that's helpful for you before you start coming into words.
Wow, that really helps me enter into the resonance. Thank you so much for doing that.
You're welcome.
All right. So what's meaningful and alive for me right now is my partner and I are eldering. And we have had this lifelong dream, if you will. We created a nonprofit that is oriented toward, well, it's called Life World Reconnect, and it's about reconnecting people with the natural environment, but also emphasizing transformation of consciousness, inner exploration, and expanding people's peace skills. And we do try to do that seasonally in the mountains of British Columbia, Canada, which is where I'm calling from right now on my phone,
Oh,
with
beautiful.
sketchy internet. So I'm glad I've been able to stick with the call today.
That's great, Josie. I'll just tell you as an aside, I grew up in BC, in North Vancouver, actually, so I have a fondness
Small
for where
world.
you are. Yeah.
Yeah, small world. We're in the Canadian Rockies on the eastern side.
Mhm.
So anyway, for 40 plus years now, we've been going from Wisconsin, coming here for the summer for 6 months of the year, and then back to the States for 6 months of the year. So we've had this nomadic lifestyle. But the main point is that, you know, we've tried to work the property here that we own.
Mhm.
And we are of limited resources, both physically and financially now, especially. And we're at the point where we're realizing that we cannot do this alone, and we don't have the community yet to pass the torch, so to speak.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
this is such a special property, such a special place that we really, really want to find other aligned entities whose vision and mission, you know, are similar to ours, who might want to expand their services. But I'm not wanting to go into strategy right away and panic about strategy.
Mhm.
It's really
Mhm.
about how do we open that field and attract, attract the well, like-minded is not the term I'd like to use, but what's
Mhm. Mhm.
collaborators is the best term I can come up with. Entities that would be interested in collaborating. And
Mhm.
the bigger piece of this is not just the how-to, but thinking about changing the model about the way nonprofits typically work in their own little bubble, in
Mhm.
their own little space, in their own little universe. Like the concept, if it doesn't sound too crazy, that I'm thinking about, is kind of like a nonprofit timeshare, if you will. Where people could bring
Uh-huh.
physical and or resources to the
Mm.
project here, where we got some infrastructure, but not all of it.
Mhm.
And then, you know, one organization could use it for 1 month of the year, you know, of the summer, and
Mhm.
another organization might want to do something a little different, but, you know, have it for another month for their activities. So
Mhm.
I don't know if this is like completely off the wall, or if
Mhm.
we're moving in the right direction. And it's really
Yeah.
important to us right now to
Oh,
sort through this.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm feeling as you talk. As you first were talking, just feeling the excitement, the passion, the vision
Mm.
that you and your partner have. And then as you were talking, I was feeling like the limitation that you're bumping up against, like you're saying. And the kind of the new question that I think you're sitting with, which is like, how do we continue this vision and how do we open it up to other people? Because it's so important to you. I can really feel how important it is to you.
Yeah. So as you say that, Riaz, what comes up for me is the whole quality of invitation is really important somehow. And I don't know how to
Mm-hmm.
do this really. I have a sense that I don't know how to invite people and
Mm-hmm.
community, build community kind of, um, you know, as quickly as possible.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and it's interesting as I listen to you, when you say it's as quickly as possible, I can even hear it in the way you're talking. Like there's an urgency in the quickness of your speaking. I don't know if you can
Oh
feel
yeah.
that.
No,
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the tone went up and everything. And I'm like
Mhm.
lifting off of my seat here.
Yeah.
Um, physically.
Can I offer something to you, Josie, just in this moment, if
Sure,
I may? Yeah.
sure.
I wonder what it'd be like to just slow down and just to feel like, I don't know, like just what you said.
Yeah.
Like there's so much excitement, so much urgency to find a way to collaborate and invite people in. And then I just really heard what you said, which is, I don't know how, but it's really important that there's like a resonance here. It's done in the right way with the right people, and just let yourself drop down into that question, that not knowing, but the feeling that's really important to you. Just
Well, you know what
be with
comes up
that.
immediately is this physical sensation of fear in my gut,
Mm.
because really what I'm wanting to do is trust the universe. And um, I don't know that it will work in this instance.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Yeah.
should be okay. And yet I would like to have a
I
better outcome.
I really want to trust the universe, and I'm scared. I don't
Yeah.
know if I can trust the universe. I don't know if my outcome will be taken care of.
Yes.
I just want to reflect that back to you, like just exactly what I'm hearing from you, which is, I really want this, and I want to trust and open to it, and yet there's like a fear in my belly, a mistrust. Can I trust this will be okay? I can open to this. So just be with that, just with my reflection and your inner experience. Take your time with it. Can I trust this? Am I afraid to trust this? To be with the whole place of it. And your heart, and because I think I'm saying that, by the way, because I'm still feeling your heart passion, your excitement. That's what I'm feeling, is like it's a lot of aliveness in my own heart. So I think that's where that question or invitation is coming from. Stay connected to your heart, even as you drop down into the belly, into the fear.
That does create a sense of spaciousness for me. Thank you.
Mm. Mm. So stay with that. Notice what that's like to just stay with that spaciousness, that heartful connection. Take your time. Just breathe with it. Just patiently sitting with you.
I'm feeling balanced and received. Thank you.
Nice. I'm glad you're feeling balanced and received. What's the experience of that? Is that somatic or emotional or imaginal?
It's like just dropping down to an easier level of breathing
Nice,
and
nice. Yeah.
and releasing the knot in my stomach.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. So that's just my, forgive me, Josie, and the rest of you. Like, I can't help but my therapist part comes online when I listen in this context, especially. That was my impulse, is just to kind of slow you down, to feel the fear in your belly, but to actually stay connected to the aliveness, because a lot of the energy was going up, and I imagine you're feeling you're more connected to your heart and to your body and to your passion, and then there's a relaxation that happens around the fear and the knot in the belly, because that's actually my somatic experience. As I'm tracking you, is like I feel more opening and softening in my own belly. And I just would say, like, as you move forward in the not knowing but trying to know, because you need to figure out solutions and strategies, slow down, just like you were kind of saying, like, and stay connected to the essence, the heart of what this is for you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Shariah, if you can just sort of, put us back into gallery mode, or I'll put myself back into gallery mode. And then I just wanted to talk about our experience. Josie, are you okay with me commenting a little bit about you, but mostly about the process? And I might even open it up to comments or questions. So, I'm really curious what people were tracking. I'll just say what I was tracking and what I did. As you saw, like, you guys might do this yourselves, but I couldn't quite help but become my therapeutic self to some degree, which you may or may not do. And if I was talking to a friend, I may not have gone in that direction unless I was really feeling a lot of invitation or space for that. Context really happens. Are you talking in the grocery store? Are you talking on the phone? Are they just wanting to vent and download? Or are they really wanting, like, support? All of those contexts and buy-in is really important. because of the context in which we're meeting and the way I could feel you, Josie, I just felt a kind of a context of permission, like I'm just going to lean in with you. I'm going to kind of, more than just listen and reflect, offer you a little bit of direction, So I just want to be really transparent about that. I really shifted into a more directing kind of place at some point. And where that was coming from, just to be totally transparent, is I was really enjoying feeling at the beginning just your passion, Josie, and aliveness. I love what you're doing with your partner and can feel how alive that is for you and what you're creating. And then I could also feel the urgency of this sort of dilemma of limited resources, both in body and other ways, and the need to have support or pass it on or bring collaborators on board. But as you started to talk about that, like the quickness of your pace increased. I was feeling a frenetic quality, and even you talked about this earlier. The upward kind of upwelling of energy to the head and to the strategizing was actually a little bit like it was noticeable, and somatically for me, it was a little uncomfortable. I felt like she was going a little fast, and I wanted to slow her down internally. And I also felt like it was going up into that kind of heady solution place. And part of me, I probably in a different moment might have been like, well, let me think with you about this. But really my impulse was just to I think the best thing I can offer her was to slow down, to feel and sense. So that's what I did, is I just wanted to kind of find a way to slow you down and bring you down. And most obvious way, and it just kind of came somatically for me as well, energetically, was I was still feeling the aliveness from the beginning. And I just thought, well, let me see if I can help you reconnect to that aliveness, to the heart quality. And once I did that, I could just feel you drop down out of the head. I'm saying this as if I know, I'm just telling you my subjective impression. And then once you were connected to your heart, I did actually somatically feel a kind of relaxation of the belly. And then both of these were present kind of together. And so there was more of a sense of kind of wholeness or connection, which I think corresponds to what you were saying at the end. So Josie, please feel free to elaborate or clarify any of your experiences as I'm sharing my experience.
No, you're, absolutely spot on, in terms of noticing the rising, the uprising, the upwelling, going back to the mind. And, I hadn't tapped into the dis-ease, the fear underneath what it just doesn't work.
That's it.
Yeah.
There's a knot. You said it really clearly. There's a knot, which is a fear. And you even started to, and I reflected it back to you, like, part of you wants to trust, and you have a deep trust, clearly, and you're bumping into a place of mistrust, and it's being held in your belly. And that's just a gift to know that, not to try bypass the fear, which our minds want to do. How do I get past my mistrust? How do I get past my fear? How do I find the perfect solution? So the way through, which I think I was directing you to, is to include the fear, but stay connected to the heart and the body. And then the mind will kind of be your servant. It won't be the master. It won't try to, I know where to go, let's figure it out. It'll just be the way the mind is used best, which is as a kind of a connection to the whole. Like, oh, okay, I know what I'm scared of. I know how to be with what I'm scared of. I know what I'm excited about. I know what I really want. Okay, then the wisdom of the mind actually comes online. How do I move forward from this place? But it's an inclusive, connected place, not a dissociated kind of strategizing place. Yeah.
Right. And interestingly, any effort that we put out there, that's what you just described is the energy from which we'd like to, create something emergent, to collaborate with something emergent. So it really was helpful to identify that I'm holding that fear and mistrust. And that's something that I can connect with, just welcome it, have it sit on the sofa next to me and not push it away.
Yeah. So really what I'm inviting you to do is to listen to your fear, listen to your belly, listen to your belief, and you've got it. I can just feel you're just going to pick up that ball and run with it. And so that comes through listening, right? Like as I'm listening and I'm tuning into your fear and where you're going, I can help you attune to it. I didn't need to give you a solution. I just helped you listen, where to listen, what to listen to. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I'm doing this little mental flip with the language a little bit. And for me, it's like receiving, just being willing to receive.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Listening puts me back in my mind.
Good.
Receiving puts me back in my heart.
Lovely. Lovely. That's great. Yeah. Words are important, and your own words are the most important. What's resonant for you. Yeah. Okay. Beautiful example. I'll just make a comment or two. When you're in your dyads with each other, it doesn't need to look like what I did. In some ways, I was a little afraid, like, oh no, now people are going to think they need to be therapeutic and really directive. And if it goes that way, it goes that way, but don't feel like it needs to go that way. Truly, just simply listening, reflecting, being mostly silent would be just fine. So don't feel like you need to be something like what you just watched. I didn't expect to go that way. It's just kind of what was alive. Okay. All right. Any comments or questions about what you experienced? Shariah, yeah.
Sorry, Riaz. Yeah, I just have a question about the numbers. Because we're odd numbers, will you be joining a dyad room?
Yeah, to even it out, I'd be happy to join in, and if hopefully people will feel okay with me being their partner. Usually they are. I think so. Yeah. So we'll just include me then too. Thanks. Any other questions before we move towards the dyads around the shared experience or what you witnessed or your own experiences you were witnessing, listening? Yes, please, Alex.
Being bold and actually talking in these sessions, it's unusual. So thank you.
Good, thank you.
I like the intimacy of the group and the comments so far. I think we are all similarly valued.
I appreciate your boldness.
Thank you. What's in my personal practice, in my meditation practice over the last couple of years, I've had the gift of experiencing John Prendergast and Adyashanti. And so it's opened me to this whole awareness of body sensing. And so it really does feel like when I listen to the two of you, that there's this sense of vibration in my body through my legs. And what I'm trying now to find the balance between, and maybe efforting is not what one does, but is to sit within this aliveness of my body and this heart connection that sometimes can feel overwhelming, as you can tell. Mm-hmm. And also be clear-minded enough to be articulate, to feel like I am being of service, I guess, by contributing. So it was interesting to watch you, and I know you're a therapist, and I actually work as an outreach worker too. So am somebody who sits with people when they are problem saturated a lot. But it was interesting to see how you kind of simply mirrored, and I know simple sounds like it's diminishing the power of it, but how so much of how you respond is this kind of shining back, reflecting back, and how powerful that is. So going into the next session, I know I feel like, oh my gosh, I hope I can hold on to myself and be helpful. Yeah, but that's some of what's going on for me anyway.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I'm sensing and you're describing just your sensitivity, your aliveness, your energetic, emotional aliveness. And it's an incredible instrument we have. And we kind of need to learn to use it. Like, how do we, stay connected to ourselves, stay at home and stay grounded, not overwhelmed by it? And then how do we feed it back when useful, when necessary, in words or in reflections or in directions, interventions? that's all like the art of it, and it takes a lifetime. It'll continue to take me a lifetime, I think, to just get better and better at it. But the first thing is most important, which I think you're really practicing clearly, and is just staying at home, as John likes to say, staying at home in your experience, and less is more. I keep wanting to say that. We think we need to do a lot with it, but like you just reflected back so beautifully. Simple reflection. It sounds simple, and it sounds like simple is less, but no. When we can just simply reflect back, it's one of the most helpful things for the other, because they can see themselves more clearly, or feel, they come into a kind of more vivid, visceral connection to themselves. And so for me, I always find that's one of the best things that I can give. And you just get better at knowing when and how to share that. And, just don't put any pressure on yourself to have to do it any particular way. And you'll notice, like I do, it just will kind of come forward more intuitively. It'll come forward as an impulse, rather than your mind saying, okay, how do I translate this into something useful? A lot of times just simply letting yourself vibrate and feel the other person is actually doing something, like you were saying with Josie and I. Even if I hadn't said much and I just listened the whole time, my sense is that there would have been an arc to Josie's experience, even without me doing the interventions, that would have been helpful. That's my sense of it, because she's hearing and feeling herself in the listening field that I'm offering.
Thank you so much. And what's fascinating too is this awareness that as you set this whole course up, that listening this way is so much the same as meditation practice. So it's almost, I never realized I had all these opportunities during my day in which I can be in a meditative state, and continue to practice on this path that to me seems like it has so much power and so much truth in it. So thank you for all of.
I love that came together for you, because it's truly how I think of it. I think of listening as relational meditation, and it's a profound practice that we can do all the time. And so I love that you're kind of getting that, and you can give yourself to that. Yeah. Rajan, you had your hand raised earlier. Is it still a raised hand for you?
Yeah, my head's kind of tied up in knots right now, which is, I felt like what you and Josie did was such a deep dive in witnessing, and like really put my head in your space as the witness, as opposed to the person being witnessed. And one of the things that got me thinking about is when in conversation, as opposed to just having a role as a witness, your back and forth is happening. It's usually back and forth. It's a dialogue, and it's happening much faster, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a thought I had, and maybe this we can pin it up, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole with this, is that what I started thinking about is, as the person being witnessed, also, if you apply 4 layers of being in touch, you can then that opportunity to have a deeper conversation also can arise. So, but and just thinking about all of us meeting each other for the first time in the next few minutes, probably, I was like, well, this is a lot more like going to the pet store or the hardware store for any of us. It's not sitting on a couch with you.
Yes and no, Rajan. Because when you go into your dyads, I think there's an invitation I want to make to each of you to actually drop in with each other. And I would say drop into all 4 levels, And then I hear your point, which is, most of the time in our conversations with people, it stays on a certain level, right? And yet, if you make the invitation for yourself to listen on 4 levels, unconsciously, unspokenly, often it might help the other person listen to themselves on those 4 levels. Because this is the thing that I haven't spoken about, but it's we entrain each other. Consciousness just works this way, you know. If somebody's speaking on the level of the mind and you start listening on the level of the mind, it'll stay on the level of the mind. But if you, as you're listening to them, they might start out on the level of the mind, content and complaints and stories and, you know, narrative. But you actually, while you're listening, are actually sensing the heart space and the feeling tone and the vibration, the sensation and feeling of spaciousness. You might entrain them, because your center of gravity is dropping down, to actually start to become aware of layers that they're not aware of. Not just because you're directing them to slow down and take a breath and feel their body, which you might do actually, and definitely as a therapist I do, but just because, you know, they might be entraining you into the state, let's stay on the level of mind and figure out my problem. But if you don't collude with that, then you say, okay, I'll listen to you on that level, but I'm staying in the depth of my being. Like all of a sudden, consciousness entrains, and people all of a sudden might start to feel other levels of their experience open up and become more able to listen more deeply to themselves. So, you know, you're helping me kind of bring up something else, which is we can deepen conversations with the depth of our listening, and not in a manipulative way, in just an expansive, generous way. Okay, so we move into practice. Anything else before we go into our rooms? All right, so here's my instructions before Sharaya whisks us off into our rooms. I think what we'll do, let me see the time. Yeah, we've got some time, it's good. I think what I'll do is I'll keep the time. And Sharaya, do I have the, or can you do it? Can you send a 1-minute message to people, or just a message by chat after 9 minutes, say in 1 minute, end the first direction of listening, where one of you is speaking and one of you is listening primarily. And so at 9 minutes, she'll give us a warning, wind it wind it up in a minute, and then you can do that. I'm trying to think, should I do debrief? Yeah, let's do it this way. Let's do actually after 8 minutes, give us a warning, you know, a 1 minute warning. So at 9 minutes, we'll stop. And then we'll just give 2 minutes of debrief time, where you just get to talk about how it was, or kind of shift modes. You know, don't get too caught up in it, in debriefing all of it, but just you get to kind of just reflect on your experience a little bit, both as a listener and the person listening. So we'll take a couple of minutes to do that. And then after those couple of minutes, Shariah, maybe just send another note saying start your new direction. And then we'll do the same thing, 8 minutes, and then a minute warning, and then a couple of minutes to debrief, just talk about, reflect on. And then so in whole, it'll be about 22 minutes or so, something like that, 24 minutes. And then you can just send us that message at the end, come back to the room, and it gives us 1 minute back to come back to the main room, and we'll all have group dialogue and discussion together. So is that clear for you with the timing, Shariah? Okay, so for your instructions, I'll just go over them really briefly. Once you get paired up, immediately decide who's going to speak first and who's going to listen first. And then you can just start. Then you can start by simply just maybe taking 30 seconds or 20 seconds, doesn't need to be long, just to settle in. And for you as the listener in particular, ring the bell of intention. To breathe, to be aware of breathing, to sense, to feel, to be aware. You might just ask yourself those questions that help you continually, from time to time, drop into the different levels. And then beyond that, there's no agenda. Just listen, just be present. You don't need to fix, you don't need to be brilliant, you don't need to give them some nugget by the end of it. You don't need to prove yourself as a great listener. You get to practice. I really want to underline that, practice. Practice is where we just get to be imperfect. We get to try stuff out. This is low stakes, you guys. Nobody's going to die if you don't listen well. Nobody's going to get evaluated and kicked out of the course. In some ways, honestly, as we know this from practice, some of the places we stumble are the places we learn the most from. So let yourself stumble, let yourself try stuff out, and then after, when we debrief, feel free to kind of really let the other person know, like, when you did this, this was super helpful, or I really felt this from you. Oh, and this, I know this is more vulnerable. Like, when you did that, it took me out of my experience, or it, maybe it threw you off, or maybe it didn't, maybe it was helpful. You can really give people feedback in a kind way, not in a critical way, because we learn from each other. Okay. And there doesn't need to be criticism, by the way, or negative stuff. I'm just saying, if it feels like there's something useful you can share in both directions, feel free to do that. But mostly this is just for our own learning, for our own practice. And then the final thing is just what I said to Josie. Share something meaningful, something that's a bit alive for you. Nothing super intense. It can be positive, exciting, growthful. It can be negative, to use those simple terms, difficult, challenging, fearful, contracting. Either direction's fine. And you may not even know until you have the space, so you don't need to pre-think it. Just let it unfold in the space that's invited. Okay. Clear enough instructions? Enjoy yourselves. See you all back here in about 24 minutes in the group space, and we'll have some time to dialogue and debrief.
Okay, I'll open the rooms now.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Lori, I hope you're with us. Maybe she's not quite back, but she'll be joining us soon, I hope. Was somebody partnered with Lori? Was she in the dyad? Oh, there she is. Good. Welcome back, Lori. Hi. Okay, well, welcome back. I am really curious about people's experiences. I had a wonderful experience myself, paired with Mike. Maybe I'll share more about that, or he'll share. But everybody's welcome to share. And the nature of this in these last 20 minutes is really, we got to practice. You got a little bit of debrief maybe with each other. But this is kind of the group debrief. This is the place where we bring back our experience, positive or negative or mixed or confused or ecstatic or whatever. It's all welcome. And get to kind of go, here's what I'm learning, or here's what I bumped into, or here's what I discovered. And it's helpful, as we know in learning, you have the experience and then you reflect on the experience. And not just reflect on the experience with your mind, which is helpful. Talking about it is helpful. Kind of helps ingrain it. Or talking about sharing a confusion or a question or an experience that was difficult. Might be a little harder in the group format, a little more vulnerable, but I really want to encourage any and all of your experiences. Yeah. On either side of it, by the way, what it was like to be listened to, what it was like to be listening in this intentional way that I'm prescribing. You don't even need to use a raised hand. You can just speak or put your literal hand up.
Okay, I'm going to dive right in. I was trying to wave my hand, but I've got this little thumbnail that
Oh,
I'm
I'm
not.
sorry, I couldn't see you waving, Jesse. Good. I'm glad you
It's okay.
dove in.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
So yeah, I have a little bit of a learning and a question. So Rajan was my partner, and I went into, it was wonderful listening to him. And when it was my turn to speak, I sort of expanded on the whole thing that I shared with you. And I actually came to another level
Hmm.
of what would I call it? Of motivation, shall we say,
Hmm.
for the situation that we're in. And that was really helpful. And so my question, I'm not quite sure how to articulate it, but I've had like 2 rounds today. And so my question is floating around, you know, is there any benefit to like hitting the pause button with someone, giving them a chance to kind of catch up internally, and then resuming at second with a second round, if you will, because that was helpful for me. So
Yeah.
does that question make any sense?
Yeah. On multiple levels, it makes sense. Obviously, multiple conversations interspersed with time to integrate or marinate or whatever, you want to say is helpful. Like, you had an experience with me that was helpful. You got in touch with something. You had a little bit of time to digest it, to metabolize it. And then you got a kind of a second experience, a fresh experience. And then a second layer, and I don't know what it is, but I'm guessing the second layer builds on the first or accentuates or is connected to the first. So they're not unconnected. They're not just totally random, fresh experiences. They're, cumulative in a certain way. So, just like with anything, you can have multiple conversations with a person over time and get multiple benefits, or people over time. But the main thing I want to say is that that can happen within a conversation, actually, if you give space to breathe to the person you're listening to, or even to yourself. And we can do this in different ways. There's moments of intensity in conversations where realizations or ahas happen. Somebody has emotions or tears or kind of a, oh, wow, really get that. And then it's like a conversation is kind of like a musical piece. There's crescendos and intensities, and then you want to maybe go back into a little bit of a lull, a little bit of a kind of a quieter movement, if you will. And so you can give somebody the space to just hang out with something. These are different in different contexts. If you're sitting with a friend at a coffee table and there's a lot of stuff going on, you might not just say, hey, just be with that feeling or sensation for a few minutes. You might. It depends how weird you want to be, right? And how weird she or he wants to be too. But there's also ways to just kind of like let the conversation settle with a little bit more time, with a little bit more space, or just ask them to just say, how is that to feel that? Or what's that like to think about? Or how's that to reflect on? So you're kind of giving them a little bit of metabolizing space before you just keep going to the next and the next and the next, which can be the vibration often when there's a lot of energy or insight. You or the other person wants to capitalize on it and dig deeper and go farther. I know that impulse in myself, with others, and with myself. And we miss out on the power of actually letting things breathe and metabolize and settle. So look for ways in conversations, and you can do this for yourself, by the way. I find myself doing this unconsciously or maybe subconsciously. I'll have a big insight when somebody's talking to me or listening to me, and then I'll kind of close my eyes and I'll be quiet because I'm trying to metabolize the experience. And I'm also unconsciously or quietly giving them the signal, like, just leave me alone for a few moments. Like, let's just slow down. And you can give yourself that, or you can even ask for it and say, hey, can I just kind of sit with this for a few moments before we move on? And that's helpful. And you can also do that when you have a sense with somebody else of like, hey, that's like, seems like a really powerful insight. Maybe just hang out with that for a bit. Just breathe with that. Just sit with that. It's a real gift. It's one of the gifts we can give each other, because we're breaking a lot of listening really well breaks polite conventions. You know, leaving silence, leaving gaps, letting people close their eyes, you closing your eyes, like all these taboos we have against like social conversation, which in a way actually keep things at a surface level. And so if you want to drop things down into a deeper level, be willing to break conventions with yourself and with the other person. Invite people to break conventions. You don't talk about it that way. You just let them know you're okay with it, or let them know you're doing it. So anyway, I hope I helped you with that question. Yeah. And Mike, I see your hand raised, so let's come to Mike next.
The random number generator smiled on me, and I paired with Riaz, who I know and love. And I wanted to share with the group our experience, because it was different than Riaz's demonstration with Josie, in which he was very verbally active. And in our case, we did switch back and forth, and the experience that I felt in both directions was much more of, I would describe as very active stillness on the part of the listener. And that creating that field actually allowed us to have a conversation, even though the conversations were about somewhat worldly things. The conversations were really about the deeper spiritual truth of what we each truly and deeply are. And so that power comes from the silence, which, as it turns out, is what we truly deeply are. So I wanted to share the counter example, even though you all weren't able to experience it. For those of you who don't have as much exposure to Riaz, that he's got lots of tricks, but one of the fundamental methods is that silence and stillness that encompasses the deepest aspect of listening.
Thanks for sharing that, Mike. It's a great counterpoint. I'm glad you brought that in. And yeah, I think as Mike said, I experienced that in his listening as well. There was very little words until towards the end. Similar for me, I think, when I was listening to Mike. And I just want to share this because this might be helpful to others. As I was listening to Mike, he was sharing actually really positive, really beautiful experiences he's been having recently. And I had so much energy bubbling up joyfully kind of in my experience. And there was many moments actually where I wanted to ask him questions about it, or like, oh, that's so awesome. But I refrained from doing that because I could actually feel, and his hands were doing this, by the way. His hands kept doing this. I don't know if you're aware of that, Mike. It was like this effervescence from the heart out and up, you know. And yet I was just vicariously effervescing with Mike and enjoying the bubbling up and the joy and resonating with him and refraining. Sometimes the best thing I do when I listen is not speak, honestly. I think sometimes the best thing we do is just offer our attention, our presence. It wasn't like I was holding on to it. Like if it was something I really needed to speak, I would have spoken it. But I could just feel like, oh, just let this air, just bathe in it, bask in it. And he gets to bathe and bask in it, and we get to bathe and bask in it. And then by the end of it, it just naturally went to a place where there was more dialogue and connection and reflection. It didn't need to go there, but it just naturally went there. And as Mike said, it went very deep. And I had a very similar experience as you were listening to me as well, Mike. So I really appreciate you bringing in that point, and it just helps me reflect or kind of share. There was a lot of stillness, but it's a very, I wouldn't say noisy, very alive stillness that was going on, because there was a lot of resonance and feeling and energy moving as I listened. It didn't need to be shared, at least until it did. Okay, yeah, I do see Marilena, your hand up.
Yeah. Yes, I'm joining Michael because we had a similar experience. I've been with Richard, and as he started to talk, I felt it was like starting somewhere up here in the mind, and then he came down, 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 down. And I felt myself, yes, just finally, because for me, up to now, it was far too much speaking. I was expecting something different in this evening. For me, it's evening here in Germany, and so it was, now it's happening, we are in a diet and we are experiencing it. And oh yes, and I think I said nothing in the beginning. I can't remember really. And yeah, and then there was this connection already, and we had slowed down a lot when we had the turn, and I was then speaking, and I think we really connected in the heart and in the presence, which I before had asked myself what that is. And so maybe I would have another word for it usually, but I know it is state. And then I asked Richard, and he said, yes, this is presence now. I said, okay, this is presence. So it's good. That's fine. Yeah. And then it was really a very nice thing happening for me, really in the end with Richard. Because he gave me, he said that he had met some Germans and that we all had this sort of quality, like the same quality, like Richard, I can't remember. You said sweetness, and what was the other thing? Can't
Like
remember.
a certain heart and sweetness and kindness. Yeah.
And I thought, wow, somebody else is perceiving me and other Germans like that. And I thought, well, this is a whole new perspective for me to what's Germans, So that was a very good experience. And thanks for that space. Yeah.
Let me just jump in there, Richard. If you want to add anything, feel free. But what you described, the main thing I just want to reflect back is something that happens very commonly, which is when we start speaking, especially if we're caught in something or just wanting to talk about something, we start up here. We start in our heads. We start with thoughts and with narrative, and sometimes with a lot of, if it's hard, with difficult emotion. And I kind of think about if we're really a grounded presence and listening and letting somebody speak, it's like they unwind and they find their way down, down, down into the body, into the heart, into feeling, all the way down into presence. If you just let them unwind, but in a way you're holding that space. You're inviting them to be in that space. You're not trying to pull them down into it. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's really just a holding a space and a kind of an open invitation and a presence and a stillness and a welcome for all of it to just sort of settle, kind of like a snow globe will settle in time, like we talk about in meditation. Once you sit, things will start to settle. And then there's more of that spacious stillness and a quality of connection. And we just have to be patient with it. And there are techniques and there are ways to invite people down and slow them down. But a lot of it is just simple patience.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Anything else?
I like to share. It was so wonderful and easy to listen to Deborah. I feel like I made a new friend, and it was easy to kind of feel the different levels, especially the heart within our conversation. It was harder to share, which was really interesting for me to discover. And even in the listening, my voice, even whether it was expressed or not, or this alignment with me, was easy. It was totally available, I think. But the sharing wasn't as easy. Anyway, that's all. But really enjoyed doing it with Deborah. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Thanks for sharing that. Any last comments? We just have a couple of minutes left.
I have some. I have a question, or maybe some questions. Because out of the announcement of this course, whatever evening, it was for me, or I say what I was expecting, which wasn't what happened then here, was like, how do I have this distinction from, I know it pretty well, when I have these conversations from mind to mind, because it gets very boring for me after a very short time. And then when I have it like from the heart, I know as well, because I'm sensing that very much. What would it mean to be from, what is it, body to body and presence to presence? If you could elaborate on that for me, so that I can have more like the distinction from where I'm at in different moments.
Okay. Not a lot of time to really go into it, but I'll just give a real brief response. So yeah, we all know the mind-to-mind experience. We're just in the level of words and concepts and thinking. We know the emotional experience of heart to heart. We're feeling each other, feeling with each other. There's an empathic kind of connection. Body is really, it's really obvious. We may overlook it. I was having a body resonance and an emotional resonance with Mike. I was describing all this effervescence I was feeling, energy happening. And I was pretty sure Mike was having the same experience. His hands were telling me he was doing it. And my body was just matching. So I was resonating, vibrating somatically, energetically with him. The opposite can happen. It wasn't happening with Mike so much. It happened slightly when I was with Josie. I felt a tightness in my stomach, a numbness in my stomach, which she later started to speak to as a knot in her belly. So my body was resonating with her body. And then I felt a relaxation as she made contact with that fear and described an opening happening. So that's the body to body experience of resonance or communication, And then presence to presence, it's harder to speak about because it's just a sense of being together. It's a sense of shared field. There's a two-ness and a oneness simultaneously. You have a sense that you're looking at a distinct other, and they're looking at you, and you may be hearing them, and they may be hearing you. So there's two, and yet it's all happening in this kind of shared field of awareness. And that can have, somatic and energetic components to it, where you actually can sense and feel each other emotionally and vibrationally. But there's just a kind of a sense, it can be very quiet and sometimes can be very pronounced, of like, there's only one of us here looking back at itself from two distinct vantage points. It's quite a profound and beautiful experience when it comes into full recognition. but it's actually the experience we're always having, knowingly or unknowingly. So that's my response.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to honor our time and your time. I know we are a couple of minutes past. I'll just say this to end. A couple things. One is, I think I will get all of your emails from Open Circle unless you've not allowed for that choice. I will send you my notes on deep listening and the 4 levels of listening. You'll also automatically, if you're okay with it, be added to my email list and hear about future offerings that I occasionally teach courses and day-long retreats and multi-day retreats. There'll be one coming up in October, so you'll hear about that. I'd love to see any of you if you're drawn to any of my new offerings, but thank you for your presence today. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for sharing your hearts and your words, and may this be of benefit to you and to all around you. Yeah, really, truly a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You can unmute yourselves and say hello and goodbye and whatever if you'd like in the last few seconds here.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you so
So
much.
Let's do it
Thanks,
again.
everyone.
Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank
Daniel.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.